Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host and special guest, Marc, the Tin Man Alardo. Marc, how you doing, brother?
Oh, doing well. And it's so wonderful to hear Tin Man because it's, of course, the name I picked up on the Alpha weekend, which was only 11 days ago for me. And it's very appropriate. So yeah, the other men in the group picked that name for me. It was really crazy idea, and yet it fit perfectly. So
It did. We can go into that a little bit, but first, I wanted to thank you. And guys listening to this, Marc's been through our activation method. He joined the Brotherhood, which is one of our 1-year mastermind group programs. And I had the honor and privilege of being the head coach through his Alpha Reset. And we'll jump into that a second. So, Marc, thank you for being so gracious and brave to jump onto this call last minute with me. So I really appreciate it.
my pleasure.
So, Marc, just so we can give guys a little bit of rough idea about who you are, a little bit back, kind of what we call the elevator speech. Tell them who you are, give them a little synopsis so we know who we're talking to.
Yeah, I've had an interesting life. We'll say that. I've had quite a successful career in business, so I was lucky enough to do that. But I've had already 4 different careers in 4 various fields. I started out on Wall Street. I was a trader on the floor, actually, and had to take singing lessons because I lost my voice so often. And in those times, it was quite interesting. And have subsequently done quite a few other things. And at this point in my life, I'm 62 years old. Business is not so much a focus for me. It is my family. I have 4 children by 2 wives. Unfortunately, I had an earlier marriage that failed for reasons that I understand with clarity now, having been through TPM, that I didn't understand at the time that had happened. And I've frankly, in the last 3 years, have been spending a lot of effort and time on self-improvement. And TPM is my latest endeavor for that I've been pursuing only the last 5 months. I've had lots of success with lots of other things, but I must say the TPM process has been the best for me. Unfortunately, my second marriage also has been in trouble. And my goodness, I think I've got a very good chance of turning it all around with many of the things I've learned from TPM. So it's a very exciting time for me. And yeah, really excited about what might still be coming. I'm only 5 months into it, and yet already it's been one of the most profound learning experiences of my life.
Well, yeah, and it's been great to watch your journey. And I also got to say, you're very humble in your description of yourself because you are an extraordinary man. You could be the world's most interesting man, like that commercial that's been out there. And so one of the things, guys, that are listening to this, and we have a lot of the alumni that listen to this as well, is we have a private community. And I put a post on that private community asking men of all faith, so regardless of their origin, right, to ask a question of, does the teachings that we go through and the coaches go through conflict, or does it actually enhance your faith? And Marc, you had an amazing response, and we're going to get into that in a minute here, guys. But first, I got to ask you, you're 11 days out from the Alpha Reset. How was that experience for you?
Extraordinary. I honestly, I think it was one of the 4 most extraordinary events in my life.
Wow.
All of which happened, by the way, in only the last 6 years. The first of those events, you mentioned faith, was that I'm 62 years old and have only been a Christian since age 55. I had a conversion experience in October of 2015. It was one of those things where in a single instant, I became a Christian, which is not an unusual story. It happens lots and lots of times. My previous faith life, I have an Italian heritage, and so I am Catholic. But for me, it was a tradition. It was not something that I embraced. It's something that intellectually I had objections to. Those objections had been along the lines, well, nobody really knows if God exists. I remember since the time I was 10 years old, I had asked myself that question and answer that question in this way. Nobody knows whether God exists. It's not a question worth thinking about. So as an open-minded person, I would readdress that question from time to time. And I'd always come up on that answer until I had this conversion experience. So I'm not going to give testimony here, but I'll say that everything in my life changed since then when I became Christian. And then since I became Christian, I've also been blessed with some. Absolutely, this will resonate for believers. I've had some Holy Spirit intervention in my life, and twice, and I count TPM as significant as any of those events. So it's been amazing for me.
That is amazing. And I'm going to throw a quick disclaimer out here because we have men of all faith. We have people who are Jewish, we have Muslims, we have Christians, we have agnostics, we have atheists, Buddhists, all over the realm. And when TPM isn't secular by any means, I just want to throw out that disclaimer because we had a great conversation at your Alpha Reset with some of the guys of different faiths, and you were able to bring in your perspective. And I know you've been studying religion. I'll just say that, studying. Can you share a little bit about what your journey's been there?
Sure. Largely because, as I described, my objections to faith, to spirituality, had been intellectual before, and largely because my conversion experience was an overcoming of the intellect, and so it was an understanding that goes beyond intellect. I've been very interested in things like apologetics and theology generally, and in fact, I was inspired enough to get a degree from Wheaton College in systematic theology. So I am very much a systematic theologian, and I find great utility in that. It helps to deepen my faith, and it's very exciting for me to consider all of those things. And so one of the most unusual experiences for me from TPM was that I have found it to be theologically rich, in that it has challenged me to think about theology, to think about Christ as a Christian in ways that I hadn't before. And it was something, nearly everything that I got from TPM I could not have anticipated, but that particularly was something really extraordinary. And it's been, it has helped to deepen my faith. So rather than finding anything in TPM objectionable, I have found it to be intellectually and spiritually stimulating in a way that's actually helped to actually deepen my faith, which is really quite amazing. So, and I do want to speak to what you said. Although I have an evangelical bent, and much of this conversation is going to resonate more for Christians, there isn't anything about TPM that is specifically Christian in any way. And so, and although I am very open with my Christianity, it was absolutely embraced and welcomed by the other men, even though many of them were frankly atheists, flat out non-believers. And yet there isn't, it's not an issue. It doesn't come up. It's really something apart. And so there is, I think, spiritual content, and there is spiritual content that, as a Christian, I identify as specifically Christian, but in no way is TPM a Christian program. And it's one that all people of all faiths or non-faiths ought to feel absolutely welcome in.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Mark, because what I don't want to have out of this conversation is anybody to think or come in that we are a Christian-based program, because I don't want to have unmet expectations, right, from anybody,
Right.
or vice versa. You know, at your Alpha Reset, we had a man who was of Jewish background, just as an example. He also had a great experience. And I got to say, I'm going to flip, the conversation a little bit. Your group of men that went through the Alpha Reset, it was 8 men, absolutely amazing. I mean, talk about guys of different backgrounds, different
Yeah.
religious faiths, different business histories. You guys came together as a unit. Was such a beautiful thing to see. And what these guys did is they actually kicked each guy out of the house at a moment. And then they gave the guy a nickname
Yeah.
that was befitting of that man's experience and their experience of that man. And so that hence Mark, I call Mark the Tin Man. That was the name that his brothers bestowed upon him from this event. It was such a very fitting nickname. And out of that nickname came, you shared with me, we were down, well, I can't give away, it's like Fight Club, right? You don't talk about what happens at Fight Club.
Right.
But you had told me there was an experience that you had or something that you gained that allowed you to feel closer to Christ during that experience.
Indeed, yeah. So the Tin Man from Oz, though actually from New York.
Yeah.
I am the Tin Man from New York. And of course, we know the story. And the Tin Man, the wizard gave him a heart, but in fact, the Tin Man always had a heart, and he just didn't know how to access it. And the wizard gave him the key that opened the door that allowed him to feel his heart. And as I've described, well, I came from a Wall Street, highly analytical, highly quantitative background. It has been a huge part of my success in business. I am, like a lot of men. Oh, I'm not going to say I am. I was.
There you go.
I was. I was, like a lot of men, very much in my head, and really unable, at least severely degraded, in being able to experience the world, experience relationships, experience all of it, experience all of God's creation through heart, which is, you've helped me locate it right here. I've been I've been that pathway has been very obstructed for me, and always had been. And then I went to this reset, and because of you and the coaches and all the other men then, and the experience I had, I was able to open that sort of access. And I had a moment like the Tin Man when he found his heart. And so it's a very appropriate name for me. And so what that has changed for me already is the way that I relate to every part of the world, to the way I relate to creation, other people, the way I relate even to what we'd call general revelation, just the magnificence that we see in God's creation. Of I'm in Salt Lake City now, looking out over the mountains, and just to see that sort of majestic beauty and the way that inspires us to know the presence of God, to be able to access that both ways, through both the intellect and the heart, is it's an additive experience. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = some infinitely greater number. And so I feel like my knowledge, my experience, my intimacy with Christ, just as it's enhanced with other people, with my wife, hopefully, it's a project still in process, has already changed relationships, like people like my neighbor across the street. Like, I feel since TPM, I know him, can experience him in a way better than I had just 12 days ago. In the same way, I feel like my intimacy with Christ has been enhanced. So it's been marvelous, just marvelous. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, coaches. Thank you, all the other men that were present. Thank you, TPM. I'm eternally grateful for this.
Oh, I mean, it's been an honor to work with you because you're a man that consistently steps to the line, which is something, if anybody's been to the program, they know what we're talking about in there. So thank you. Right. It takes a lot of courage to, to raise your hand and actually do the work. It's easy it's like business. A million people have a great business idea, and only if the stars align, they'd be wealthy, and only if this and only if that. But very few step to the line and actually put in the work necessary to be successful. And it's the same with your personal journey. So I appreciate you. It makes it fun for guys like me to do what I do.
Well, I'm willing to try anything, but what you've proven, you have credibility with me, because all through the process, you're an effective coach. So I think men in business, if you're going to be successful, you recognize that you can't possibly do it all on your own. You recognize that you have to take in things from other sources. And so I think you appreciate good coaching. And so I like to be coachable. I think I am coachable, but so much of that, of course, depends on the quality of the coach. I've had better results with good coaches and fantastic results with excellent coaches, and you all are excellent coaches. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things that you and I spoke about offline is I shared with you men that are talking to our advisors. So our advisors are the first people guys will get on the phone with and just say, hey, here's my situation. Could this work for me? So the typical objections are, I don't have the time, which is the worst objection ever. I don't have the money. Understand. Okay. But another one that's been coming up quite a bit is men are saying, hey, will this interfere with my faith? Will this be against or counter to my faith? Now, most of these men, I would say 98% plus that have this objection, if you will, are Christians. And that's one of the reasons you and I started talking on, because I also wanted to figure out, hey, is there anything that we are doing as an organization or what we call a movement of men that is counter to that? What would you say to somebody that's sitting on the fence, so to speak, could use the help, but is using this as perhaps a barrier to entry?
So it's precisely a question that came up when I had my entry interview with Ryan.
Mhm.
Exactly so. It's precisely what I told him right off the bat. I said, "Hey, I am a confessional, committed Christian, and I have to wonder if any of this might interfere with my faith. But I also know that I'm very secure in my faith, and my idea was." To the extent I wouldn't had encountered anything that was contrary to my faith, I would be able to recognize that, and I'd be able to dismiss it, or perhaps think about it in another way to fit it into a Christian context. Some of the pre TPM work that I've done was with a group that uses a lot of American Indian sort of religious framework, which of course would be contrary to Christianity. But I went into that, and I was able to kind of substitute Jesus every time we talk about Mother Earth, and then do that in a rigorous way. I mean, I am a systematic theologian, so I think I'm good at being careful about not in any way degrading the model of who Jesus is, and it worked quite fine. So I had some confidence that whatever might have come up in TPM that I felt was contrary to my beliefs, my faith, would be something I'd be able to handle. It wasn't going to dissuade me from doing it. On the other hand, if there was quite a lot of that material, well, then why would I even be making the effort into the program? It didn't make any sense. Yeah. So I did want to explore that with Ryan, and he said that he didn't see any of that. And okay, so I thought, well, I'll jump into this and see how it goes. And that's where I had this amazing experience, because I haven't found anything contrary about it whatsoever. In fact, I found it to be something that supported and deepened my faith and deepened my intimacy with Christ. I spoke specifically about the way that I've gotten these new capabilities. But even before then, theologically, it got me thinking about the fullness of God's character. Do you mind getting into a little technical theology
Let's
here?
go for it, buddy.
We get a little bit deep into it here if you'd like to. But very much my theology has been influenced by what we say is theology from below. And that would be opposed to theology from above. With that theology from below, we'll take a very hard look at the historical figure of Jesus, and from his human behavior, and of course we believe that he's both human and God, and it's very Trinitarian, and that can get into all kinds of very complicated sort of concepts, but he exhibited in his human presence, in his human ministry, certain human characteristics. And from those characteristics, we can deduce a lot about the character of God. And what this did for me is broaden my understanding of who we are as people. And some of the things and so in so doing, it's broadened my understanding of who Christ is, made me appreciate him more, and just made me, it helped me to love God more. That's something I never saw coming. So that's sort of a heavily theological, systematic theology sort of way of looking at it. But maybe we can give some examples I think could be helpful. One of the things that comes very early in TPM is the importance for men to be the lighthouse in the storms of life, and very particularly in the storms of their marriage. How important it is for us to be solid in the storm and to be unmoved by the storm, engaged, of course, but unmoved. Well, let's think about Jesus in all this. In all three Gospels, we have the story of not only was Jesus the lighthouse in the storm, he actually could calm the storm. He could stop it and do it instantaneously with just his thought. Now, we're never going to be able to do that. However, as Christians, and I'm sorry to include you in that group because I understand you also are Christian. We have this concept of sanctification that over time, Christ, by the work of the Holy Spirit, works in us and makes us to become more like Him. Well, this is a perfect example of where TPM supports that. Be the lighthouse can be put another way, be like Jesus. He calmed the storm. Well, we may not be able to calm the storm, but by being the lighthouse that is unmoved by the storm, we can be a calming influence. So that's just one example. Many other such things. In order for TPM to really succeed, part of it is to surrender to some of it. And if you remember during our weekend, we're not going to talk about it, but there are a series of invitations. So I'll reveal only that much. And if the process will work, it's important to surrender to that process, which is an easy thing to do because it's coaching. Yeah, so if you want the coaching, you're going to have to do the work too. So in that process of surrender is also very much a Christian concept. I think about the Israelites before the Red Sea. If you remember that in Exodus, you remember the story, the Egyptians are coming over the mountain, and it's a terrifying moment, and they're going to be slaughtered or brought back into slavery. And the first word is, Moses, what do we do? And Moses says to God, hey, God, bail me out. And what does God say to him? Moses, what are you bothering me for? Come on, go walk into the sea, right? And so there is this moment, and it's one of the inherent contradictions of Christianity, which makes the story for Christians so beautiful. There are these inherent contradictions that are only resolved in the person of Christ, and that is we trust God completely, we surrender to Him completely, and we also do everything we possibly can. So we have to get up and walk into the Red Sea. God will part the sea for us, but we have to be courageous and walk through these hundreds of meters tall water on either side of us. So it's both do everything we possibly can and trust completely in God. So there's surrender and do all you can. My goodness, TPM in that weekend was a practical application of precisely that. It was trusting, surrendering the process, and yet engaging ourselves completely in it. And so in ways, again, that I never could have anticipated, I have found much of the TPM process supported my faith, and in fact, gave me reason for reflection. And it even gave me an idea for something, a theology I'd like to write. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. It's going to be a big project. So yeah, it is. Christians should not be concerned at all. And in fact, Christians could even say, hey, this can be something that will intensify my faith. So
it's a great point. And one of the most interesting things about the thread when I posted men of faith, right? I didn't say Christians, deliberately didn't say any religion, just men of faith. How does this enhance or take away or detract from your faith? The most common response or the commonality in a lot of the threads were, actually, Doug, I believe that my faith brought me here. Like this was a sign from the God, mostly from Jesus or from Christianity, that when I saw TPM, this was a sign.
Well, I mean, certainly a lot of the people who come to TPM, men who come there, come from difficulties they're having in marriage. And we do know that God supports marriage, and we'd like to see marriages saved. And so that fits for sure. I can understand that. Sure. Yeah.
So, Marc, I want to pivot again, right? I know you and I could talk about this all day, and I want to be respectful of your time, sir, going through there. When you look back at your journey through TPM or through this process, you know, the Tin Man who found out his heart was always there. And I mean, I'm just looking at you and I'm seeing you glow, and it is absolutely a beautiful thing. You're such a beautiful human to see here, and so gracious to be sharing this in with the group that you step in. What advice would you give to a guy who is listening to this or watching this, resonates with your story, and wants to figure out what next he should do?
Try it. Let's try it. And there is a bit of an initial commitment, but relative to the reward, hey, again, most of your clients are businessmen. They understand risk reward. You
Yep.
risk some money, you risk a little time. But I think this pretty clearly, pretty quickly, you will begin to recognize that it's worth both. And so make the small investment at first, like you do with anything in business.
And
Stick
it
your
makes,
toe in the water. Yeah.
yeah.
And you'll see how that goes. And uh, if you are coachable, well, if you've had success in business, I think you had to have been coachable or you wouldn't have gotten it because you can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
So presuming you're coachable, try this coach, sign up for it, see how it goes. That's it. And well, I said that the Alpha Reset was one of the 4 most extraordinary events in my life. There were 7 other men who went through that process with me. Uh, they all said the same thing or things similar to that. So
Commonality.
I'm here to stand up for well, I'm an evangelist. Yes, I am. I'm an evangelist for Christ. I won't do that in any context in TPM. That doesn't make sense. It's not appropriate. Yeah, I'll do that on the street. And if in TPM some man may come to me and say, "Hey, that's interesting about Christ," I'd refer him to his local minister. That would seem more appropriate. But I am an evangelist for TPM. I'll tell you that. I yeah, I've had a very difficult marriage, but it is on a path that may lead to marital health. And if, Doug, I think you know some of the depths of how degraded it was, uh, and still is largely. But this is my best chance for saving it. It is. Well, always our best hope is in Christ, and always our best hope is in that. That's true. And we surrender to Christ and we trust Him. But we're like the Israelites before the Red Sea. We got to take that step and walk on in there. And I know that I'm walking in the right direction with TPM. So
I love that. And thank you. And I want to throw a caveat out there, which is probably not what I should do. But at the same time, guys, if you're listening to this, maybe TPM's not for you, but Marc's tried other things too. Just do something, right? Being stagnant is going backwards to me, right? If you're standing still, the world's still moving forward. You're going backwards. You're degrading. You're either growing or you're dying, so to speak, in your journey. So if this doesn't resonate with you, if I don't resonate, our message, try something else. And again, I obviously think what we do is the best. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it, or I'd be grabbing other stuff and combining it and always trying to improve it. However, I want the best for you guys listening to this, regardless of what your choice is.
I'd like to speak a little bit to that. So I mentioned that self-improvement has been a big focus in my life for the last 3 years. That was provoked by my wife springing divorce on me, actually springing it 3 years ago. And that I never saw coming, and it knocked me flat. Frankly, it broke my heart, and I thought I knew well. The heart I used to have, anyway, or at least the access to the heart I used to have,
Yep.
and that's a devastating thing. You think I thought I kind of knew what a broken heart was like from music, from literature, poetry. You think you get an idea. Oh, it was much worse than that. Mm-hmm. So that provoked me to really dive into what can I do for myself in this process. And I went to traditional therapy. I had 3 different therapists, and I was spending 16 hours a month in therapy, which is a heavy deal.
Yeah.
And some of it was good, but my experience was that about 40% of it was worthless. About a third of it, well, about 25% of it was actually harmful. It was the wrong thing. Maybe not even just the wrong thing, but sometimes 100% opposite of the right thing. That wrong. And about a third of it was really good. And so I needed to be discerning about what the good parts were. In fact, one of my best therapists had a lot of things that I thought were contrary to what's best for me, but the little bit he was giving me that was good was so good it compensated for that. But I was able to do that only because I was discerning and had so much therapy from so many different angles. So I'll say there's a lot of good therapy out there, but be careful, be discerning, and in my experience, and in very small data size, I know, but also sharing that with other people, be very careful with it. The thing about TPM is I don't really see it as having downside risk. I don't see any downside in it. There isn't anything that you step into that feels like, okay, this is going to push me in the wrong direction. It does seem to be all supported. And I suppose part of the proof of that too is that I found it to be supportive of my faith walk. And so if it's that's about as strong a test as you can give it, right? So
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the Alpha Reset and the 7 other men that were there. And while you were at your Alpha Reset in Bend, Oregon with me, we had another one going on in the UK. And what happens with a lot of these, as you know, Mark, is men and women, but obviously we work with business owners, male business owners. Um, what we do is we start putting stories upon ourselves, and therapists can do the same thing and start stacking labels. It's almost like people have been putting Post-it notes about who you are or who you're supposed to be. And eventually we start keeping those on. We wear those Post-it notes, so to speak, as our labels of what we are, who we are. There was a
mm,
gentleman that went through the UK experience, had been on medication for the greater part of his adult
mhm,
life. And he discovered while there, now we do not advise this by any means. In fact, we don't advise most things. Men figure it out for themselves. That he didn't need to be on this medication. And what he was being diagnosed with was all BS. And like an experience that you had, it all became super clear to him, where almost as if the common thing guys say is it feels like you're being unplugged from the matrix. Another one is like, oh my gosh, it's as if I've been wearing rose colored sunglasses and somebody just took them off. And I realized, wow, everything doesn't have a rose tint to it. And now I can see the world clear.
mm,
And we used to call it, we strip away the bullshit, right? And get
yeah,
guys to their essence of who they always have been and the
yeah,
heart they've always had, or
yeah.
whatever it's been. So it's been interesting to see that progress. So what you're saying about therapy or other programs, we find true across the board with all the men that come through.
So interesting what you say, because as I told you, I had a conversion experience 6 years ago. It happened in a single instant for me.
Mm,
And the biblical expressions, the scales fall from your eyes. You see for the first time.
mm.
And when that experience, it was the 28th of October, 4:30 in the afternoon, Central European time, in my living room in Vienna. I mean, it's that precise an experience is what it was.
Yeah.
And the it's as if I was blind before and now I saw for the first time. But when you see for the first time, you don't recognize it then. This is a startling thing. Well, you kind of see everything kind of black and white, and it's kind of blurry. And so people who've been on a faith walk, I think this will resonate for them. And you don't see it also clearly. You hadn't seen it before, and now you're seeing it for the first time. And so it's the most dramatic increase in your capability happens when you come to recognize, for Christians to come to recognize that Jesus loves us, he created us, he's present, he's here, he wants intimate relationship with us. So that's the most startling instant. But over time, at our process of sanctification, the picture starts to sharpen, it becomes clearer, colors start to come in, and it turns out to be a more beautiful picture. Yeah. And so when you talk about TPM stripping away bullshit, is kind of that idea too. It's with greater sensitivity, with coaching, with better education, with better surrender, with better. Again, we're going to speak to one of the contradictions among many in Christianity: strength and weakness. They're all over the place. Yeah. Um, the uh, uh, the process of surrender and active makes the picture more beautiful. This process of sanctification, and so I hadn't thought of this until just now. There's a way. It's just another way that it sort of lines up. We talk about stripping away bullshit. I would say, yeah, refining your vision, seeing the world more correctly for how it really is. And when you see it more correctly, and this is super Christian concept, the picture looks more beautiful all the time. So I've got to mention one of the things you just made me remember it. There's a particular coach, the one that works most closely with me. You know who he is.
Yeah, you can say his
And
name.
I wrote to him that in this weekend, we had the good pleasure of having him there that weekend as well. He said, one of the most, he's not Christian. He's not Christian. He's spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So we've spoken about that. We're quite open with one another about all that stuff. And yet he said one of the most Christian utterances a person can, he talked about servant leadership. Servant leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And there aren't many Christians who could articulate it that well. And so just one of the many ways that this is all sort of lined up for me. Yeah. And even the example of stripping away bullshit. The pictures looks more beautiful, the creation looks more beautiful to me with the tools that TPM has given me. And that, I suppose, it's the stripping away the bullshit. So
it just allows you to be the lighthouse and shine even brighter, right? You don't have all those post-it notes on you, so to speak. Well, Marc, you've been so generous with your time, and it's been truly an honor to be a small part of your journey as you've been going through. So thank you so much for both of that as well. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
I do. I'm going to have you back. We'll talk after. I know you and I can talk for hours. I'm just conscious of your time. So, so gentlemen, as we always say, in the moment of insight, take massive action. If this is something you're interested in finding out more about, go over to thepowerfulman.com. There's a start here button. All you have to do is, or you get to do if you choose to, is get on a 15-minute conversation just to see if it's right for you. We do only work with married business owners, men like Marc, who are going through their journey. So again, Marc, thank you for being here. Gentlemen, take massive action. We'll see you next time on the Powerful Man Show.
Thank you.